The slap echoed across Maggie's diner like a gunshot, and in that terrible silence Maya Brooks stood with her cheek burning red, realizing that Sheriff Clayton Reese had just publicly humiliated her and would face no consequences because that's how things worked in Pine Hollow, Georgia, where complaints disappeared and powerful men always won. But what the sheriff didn't know as he walked out smirking was that a stranger in the corner booth had just pressed record on his phone, a former Navy SEAL, who'd made a promise to himself that he would never again stand by while power crushed the powerless, and that single moment was about to unravel an entire web of corruption. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. Pine Hollow wasn't the kind of town that made headlines. Nestled between rolling farmland and dense pine forests, it looked like something out of a postcard. White church steeples pierced the sky. Main Street had the same hardware store that had been there for 60 years. People waved at each other from pickup trucks, and Friday night football games drew half the population. But beneath that peaceful surface ran fault lines that nobody talked about openly. The town had an invisible dividing line. On one side lived families whose names appeared on the Founders Memorial in the town square. On the other side lived everyone else, including the black families who had worked the same land for generations, but never quite got their names carved into marble. It wasn't something anyone discussed at the coffee shop or the grocery store. It was just understood, accepted, the way things had always been. And if you challenged that understanding, you learned quickly that Sheriff Clayton Reese ran Pine Hollow with an iron fist wrapped in a friendly smile. Maya Brooks wiped down the counter at Maggie's diner for the third time that morning, her dark brown eyes scanning the familiar space. At 26, she'd worked here for 4 years, ever since her mother passed, and left her responsible for her younger brother Jamal. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease, since that had soaked into the vinyl booth seats over decades. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked Main Street, catching dust particles that danced in the air. She moved with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee cups before customers had to ask, remembering who took cream and who drank it black. The job wasn't glamorous, but paid the bills. More importantly, it paid Jamal's tuition at the state university 2 hours away, where he was studying engineering and making her proud every single day. "More coffee, Mr. Patterson?" Maya asked, pot already in hand. The elderly farmer nodded, pushing his cup forward. "You're a mind reader, Maya. Don't know what we'd do without you here." She smiled, but there was tiredness behind it. After her shift ended at 3, she had to drive to the community college for her nursing classes. She was studying to become an RN, taking it slow because full-time school wasn't an option when you were supporting a household. Sometimes she felt like she was running on a treadmill, working hard but staying in the same place. The diner served as Pine Hollow's crossroads. Farmers came in early for breakfast before heading to their fields. Veterans gathered mid-morning to swap stories over eggs and toast. Deputies stopped by for lunch, their uniforms and badges a constant reminder of who held authority. Travelers passing through on Highway 9 pulled in for directions and a quick meal. If you wanted to know what was happening in Pine Hollow, you sat in Maggie's diner and listened. That's how Maya knew about Sheriff Reese's reputation. Everyone knew Clayton Reese, 42 years old, with the kind of square jaw and confident smile that won elections. He'd been sheriff for 8 years, and before that, he'd been a deputy under his father, who'd also been sheriff. The Reese family practically owned law enforcement in this county. Publicly, Clayton Reese was a pillar of the community. He showed up at church on Sundays. He sponsored the Little League team. When the local news did stories about Pine Hollow, they interviewed him, and he always knew exactly what to say to make the town sound safe and wholesome. But privately, people feared him. Maya had heard the whispers. She'd seen the way people's voices dropped when his patrol car rolled past. She'd noticed how complaints against deputies seemed to vanish in a thin air, how certain families suddenly had financial troubles after crossing him, how anyone who challenges authority found themselves facing mysterious legal problems. Just last month, old Mrs. Henderson at the hardware store had pulled Maya aside. "Be careful around the sheriff, honey," she'd said quietly, glancing around to make sure nobody heard. "Don't challenge him. Nobody wins against Clayton Reese." Maya had nodded politely, but inside she'd bristled. She didn't go looking for trouble, but she also didn't believe in letting people push her around. Her mother had taught her to stand tall, to speak up when something was wrong. Still, she understood the warning. This wasn't a fair fight. The sheriff had power, connections, and a department full of deputies who followed his lead without question. There had been whispers recently about the last election, something about campaign finance irregularities and votes that didn't quite add up. But nothing was ever proven. Nothing was ever investigated. That's how things worked in Pine Hollow. The lunch rush was beginning to build when the stranger walked in. Maya noticed him immediately, the way you notice anything unusual in a small town where everyone knows everyone. He was a black man in his early 30s, tall and lean, wearing jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. Nothing flashy, nothing that drew attention. But there was something about the way he moved. He didn't walk like most customers. He scanned the room methodically, his eyes touching every corner, every exit, every person. It wasn't nervous or suspicious. It was practiced, professional. When he slid into a corner booth, he positioned himself so his back was to the wall and he could see the entire diner. Military, Maya thought immediately. She'd seen enough veterans pass through to recognize the signs. "Coffee?" she asked, approaching with the pot. "Please." His voice was calm, measured. He offered a slight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you. You just passing through?" It was the standard Pine Hollow greeting for strangers. "Visiting family nearby," he said, which Maya suspected was only partially true. There was something about the way he said it, a little too rehearsed. She poured his coffee and left him with a menu, but she noticed he spent more time observing than reading it. He watched the interactions between customers, the way the cook barked orders through the kitchen window, the dynamics of who sat where and who talked to whom. He was reading the room the way she read tables, looking for patterns and unspoken rules. His name was Andre Calloway, though Maya didn't know that yet. She didn't know he was a Navy SEAL on leave, or that he had a personal history with corruption that made him sensitive to the signs of it. She didn't know that his instincts were already picking up on the fear that permeated Pine Hollow like invisible fog. She just knew he was watching, carefully. The diner door opened with its familiar chime, and Maya's stomach tightened. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. She could tell by the way conversations stuttered and the atmosphere shifted. Sheriff Clayton Reese walked in like he owned the place, which in a way he did. He was handsome in a weathered way, with salt and pepper hair cut military short and blue eyes that could be charming or cold depending on his mood. Today, those eyes looked irritated. He'd clearly had a bad morning, and anyone who'd worked service in Pine Hollow knew that meant trouble. "Maya," he said, his voice carrying across the diner. Not a greeting, a summons. "Sheriff." She kept her voice professional, neutral. "What can I get you?" "The usual. And make it quick. I don't have time for incompetence today." She bit back her first response. The usual was a cheeseburger, medium rare, with fries and a Coke. It took exactly 12 minutes to prepare. There was nothing quick about it, and there was certainly nothing incompetent about her service. "Coming right up," she said instead. Andre watched this exchange from his corner booth. He saw the subtle stiffening of Maya's shoulders, the way her smile became a mask. He saw how other customers suddenly found their plates fascinating, avoiding eye contact with the sheriff. He saw the power dynamic written across the room in body language and silence. 20 minutes later, Maya delivered the burger. It was prepared exactly the way Reese liked it, the way it always was. But he was in a mood, and moods needed targets. "This isn't medium rare," he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Maya looked at the burger. It was textbook medium rare, pink center, properly seared. "I can ask the kitchen, too." "I said it's wrong." He cut her off, his voice sharp. "Are you telling me I don't know what medium rare looks like?" The diner had gone completely silent. Even the cook had stopped clattering pans. "No, sir," Maya said quietly. "I'll get you another one. You'll get me another one, and you'll do it with some respect." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something more dangerous. "You know what your problem is, Maya? You think you're better than everyone else. Walking around here like you're going to college makes you special." Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them steady. This wasn't about the burger. This was about control, about putting her in her place in front of everyone. "I apologize if I—" "Don't apologize," he snapped. "Just do your damn job right." She turned to go, but his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. Firm enough to show he could. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Maya met his eyes, and she saw it there. The petty cruelty of someone who enjoyed wielding power over people who couldn't fight back. She thought about Jamal's tuition, about their rent, about the nursing degree that was her ticket out of here. She thought about all the warnings she'd received. And then Sheriff Clayton Reese slapped her across the face. It wasn't a closed-fist punch. It was an open-handed slap, the kind designed to humiliate rather than injure. The sound cracked across the diner like a gunshot. Maya's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning red. For a moment, everything froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Farmers stared at their plates. The cook pretended to be busy. A mother pulled her child closer. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock on the wall. Maya stood there, her hand slowly rising to her burning cheek, tears prickling her eyes. Not from pain, from rage and humiliation and helplessness all mixed together. Sheriff Reese pushed his plate away and stood up. "Maybe next time you'll get it right," he said casually, dropping a 20 on the table. Then he walked out, the door chiming behind him like nothing had happened. In the corner booth, Andre Calloway's hands had tightened on his coffee cup. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to move, to intervene, to put that man on the ground. But he was trained for more than impulse. He was trained for strategy. He pulled out his phone, angling it carefully, and pressed record. He'd already captured everything on video. The slap, the humiliation, the silence of witnesses too afraid to speak up. Then he made a mental note of every detail. The time, the witnesses, the way Reese had deliberately provoked the confrontation. This wasn't random violence. This was systematic abuse of power. Maya tried to continue working, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She wiped down tables that were already clean, refilled sugar dispensers that were already full. Her mind was racing. Should she call the police? The sheriff was the police. Should she file a complaint? With who? His department? She thought about quitting, but that thought lasted exactly 3 seconds. She couldn't quit. Jamal needed her. They needed the income. Jobs weren't easy to find in Pine Hollow, especially for someone who'd just been publicly humiliated by the most powerful man in the county. An elderly customer, Mr. Peterson, caught her eye as he paid his bill. He was one of the few who'd lived in Pine Hollow his whole life and still had the courage to speak his mind. "That man's been unchecked too long," he said quietly, his wrinkled hand shaking slightly as he counted out bills. "Someone needs to do something." "Who?" Maya whispered back. "Who's going to stand up to the sheriff?" Mr. Peterson didn't have an answer. Nobody did. Outside, Andre made a phone call. He stood by his rental car, watching the sheriff's vehicle pull away, committing the license plate to memory. The line connected. "Command," he said quietly. "This is Calloway. We might have a situation involving local law enforcement abuse. I'm going to need some guidance here." That night, Maya sat in her small apartment, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The red mark on her cheek had faded to a dull pink, but the memory burned bright. She'd replayed the moment 100 times, thinking of all the things she should have said, all the ways she could have responded differently. But what good would that have done? Getting herself arrested? Getting fired? Making things worse? Her phone buzzed. A text from Jamal. "How was your day?" She typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on. Long. "How's studying going?" She couldn't tell him. Not yet. He wanted to drive home immediately, to confront Reese himself, to do something stupid and protective the way younger brothers do. And then what? They'd both be dealing with the sheriff's wrath. Maya had lived in Pine Hollow her whole life. She knew how this worked. She knew what happened to people who filed complaints against Clayton Reese. 3 years ago, a man named Marcus Thompson had accused a deputy of planting drugs during a traffic stop. The complaint disappeared within 48 hours. 2 weeks later, Marcus's landscaping business lost its commercial license due to permit violations that had never existed before. Within 6 months, he'd left town. Last year, a white woman named Sarah Mitchell claimed the sheriff's department had ignored her domestic violence calls because her ex-husband golfed with Deputy Harrison. She tried to go to the county board. Suddenly, her custody arrangement was being challenged, and her ex-husband had airtight alibis provided by multiple deputies. She stopped talking, stopped fighting, and eventually moved in with family 3 counties away. The pattern was always the same. Challenge the sheriff, lose everything. Maya turned off the bathroom light and climbed into bed, but sleep didn't come easily. She kept seeing the faces of all those people in the diner, looking down, saying nothing. Were they cowards? Or were they just smart enough to survive? The next morning, she almost called in sick. But that would mean lost wages, and they couldn't afford that. So she put on her uniform, covered the faint bruise with makeup, and drove to Maggie's diner with her stomach in knots. The stranger was back. Andre Calloway sat in the same corner booth, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. When Maya approached, he looked up with a calm, measuring gaze. "Good morning," he said. "Morning. Coffee, please." She poured, and he said quietly, "That was wrong. What happened yesterday?" Maya's hand stilled. She glanced around, but the diner was nearly empty this early. "I don't want to talk about it." "I understand." He took a sip of coffee. "For what it's worth, I saw it. All of it." Something in his voice made her look at him more carefully. There was a steadiness there, a quiet strength that reminded her of the veterans who sometimes came through town. Men who'd seen violence and learned to control it rather than be controlled by it. "You visiting family?" she asked, changing the subject. "Cousin lives about 20 minutes out," Andre said. It was technically true. He did have a distant cousin in the area, though that wasn't why he was here. He was here because yesterday's incident had triggered something in him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since leaving active duty. "How long you staying?" "Depends." He met her eyes. "How's the community around here?" "Friendly." Maya almost laughed. Define friendly. People look out for each other, support each other when things get hard. She sat down across from him without really meaning to. The question had opened something. "Used to be," she said. "Or maybe it never was, and I just didn't notice when I was younger. There's good people here, but they're scared." "Of what?" "Of making waves, of standing out, of challenging the wrong people." She paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What do you do?" "For a living." Andre smiled slightly. "I'm between things right now. Consider my options." It was a non-answer, and they both knew it. But Maya didn't push. Instead, she stood up. "Breakfast, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and some truth about this town if you've got it." She looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if she could trust this stranger. "Truth's not on the menu," she finally said. "But the eggs are fresh." Over the next hour, as the breakfast crowd filtered in and out, Andre observed. He noticed how people interacted with Maya, offering sympathetic looks but nothing more. He noticed how conversation stopped when certain topics came up. He noticed the deputy who came in for coffee and how everyone's posture changed, becoming just a little more guarded. This was a town living under pressure. And pressure, Andre knew, eventually found a release. By midday, word had spread. Small towns were like that. Everyone knew what had happened at the diner, and everyone had an opinion they shared in whispers. Mrs. Henderson from the hardware store pulled Maya aside at the grocery store. "Honey, I'm so sorry about yesterday, but you have to let it go. Don't make trouble." "I'm not making trouble," Maya said. "I'm just trying to do my job." "I know, sweetie. I know." The older woman's eyes were kind but firm. But Clayton Reese doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. Just be smart. Be safe. It was the same conversation Maya had 3 more times that day. Everyone was sorry. Everyone thought it was wrong. Nobody was going to do anything about it, except maybe one person. Andre spent the afternoon doing what he did best, gathering intelligence. He walked Main Street, stopping in shops, chatting with owners. He asked casual questions about the town's history, about local government, about that handsome sheriff everyone seemed to know. The responses painted a picture. Reese had been sheriff for 8 years, elected twice by comfortable margins. His father before him had held the position for 20 years. The family had deep roots, old money from timber and land deals. They owned property across the county. But beneath the official story, Andre heard other things. Harassment complaints that vanished. Arrests that seemed politically motivated. Traffic stops that targeted certain neighborhoods more than others. A pattern of behavior that spoke to systematic abuse, not just one bad moment. At the hardware store, he struck up a conversation with an older man named Douglas Patterson. "Sheriff keeps things orderly," Douglas said carefully. "But orderly for some more than others, if you know what I mean." "I'm starting to get the picture." Douglas looked at Andre with sharp eyes. "You military?" "Was. Navy." "Thought so. You got the look." Douglas lowered his voice. "There's a woman you should talk to. Name's Patricia Holbrook. Used to be a journalist for the county paper before it went under. She's got information about a lot of things." "Where would I find her?" "She lives in the old Morrison house on Elm Street. Gray Victorian with the roses out front. But be careful. People who ask too many questions about Clayton Reese tend to have bad luck." "I've had worse," Andre said. That evening, Maya was locking up the diner when she saw it. Her car, parked in its usual spot behind the building, had been vandalized. Both side mirrors were smashed. The word "careful" was keyed deep into the driver's side door. Her hand shook as she pulled out her phone. She started to dial 911, then stopped. What was she going to say? Call the sheriff's department to report vandalism that was clearly a message from the sheriff himself? Need help? She spun around. Andre stood there, hands in his pockets, that same calm expression on his face. "Did you follow me?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "No, I eat dinner here most nights." He nodded toward the diner. "Saw you come out and thought you looked upset." Maya gestured at her car. "Someone's sending a message." Andre walked around the vehicle, examining it with professional thoroughness. "No cameras back here. None that work. Convenient." He pulled out his phone and took photos from multiple angles. "You should document this. File a report." "With who?" "The sheriff's department." She laughed bitterly. "They did this." "You don't know that for certain." "Don't I?" She leaned against the brick wall, suddenly exhausted. "This is how it works here. You challenge authority, and bad things happen. Mysterious things. Things nobody can prove." Andre put his phone away and looked at her seriously. "Maya, I need to tell you something. I'm not just passing through town. I'm a Navy SEAL. And what I saw yesterday, what's happening here, it's not right. It's not legal. And I think I can help." She stared at him. "A Navy SEAL. In active duty currently, but yes. And you just happened to be in Pine Hollow when the sheriff decided to slap me? Sometimes timing is just timing. But what I do with that timing is a choice." He moved closer, his voice steady and sure. "This isn't just about one slap anymore, Maya. This is about a pattern of abuse, a corrupt system, and I have the resources and training to do something about it." "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk getting involved?" His jaw tightened. "Because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. I've lost friends because contractors lied and covered up problems. I've watched corruption cost lives. And I promised myself that whenever I had the chance to stand against it, I would." Maya wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that someone could actually challenge Clayton Reese and win. But hope was dangerous in Pine Hollow. "Hope what you hurt. What are you planning to do?" "First, I'm going to investigate. Properly. Then I'm going to contact some federal resources I trust. Civil rights violations, abuse of power under color of law. These are federal offenses. The sheriff might run this county, but he doesn't run the country. And if he finds out you're digging..." Andre smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "Let him find out. I'm not some scared civilian he can intimidate. I'm trained for situations a lot more dangerous than a corrupt small-town sheriff. That night, Maya lay in bed thinking about Andre's words. A Navy SEAL, federal resources, civil rights violations. It all sounded official and powerful and completely foreign to her experience of how justice worked in Pine Hollow. But maybe that was exactly what they needed. Someone from outside the system. Someone who didn't owe Clayton Reese anything. Someone who wasn't afraid. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stay quiet. Mind your business. This is your only warning. Her blood went cold. She screenshotted the message immediately and sent it to Andre's number, which he'd given her before leaving the diner parking lot. His response came within seconds. Document everything. Don't delete anything. This is evidence. Evidence. The word felt strange. Foreign. Like something from a TV show, not her real life. But maybe, just maybe, her real life was about to change. Because across town, in a motel room, Andre was on a video call with a contact at the Department of Justice. He was sharing footage, explaining the situation, laying groundwork for an investigation that would either expose corruption or get him in serious trouble. And in his office at the sheriff's department, Clayton Reese was looking at a report from one of his deputies. A stranger in town, asking questions, military background. The sheriff's instincts were good. He'd survived this long by seeing problems before they became threats. He picked up his phone and made a call. We got someone poking around. Find out who he is and what he wants. And make it clear that Pine Hollow doesn't appreciate outsiders making trouble. The game had begun. The players were in position. And Maya Brooks, who just wanted to serve burgers and study nursing in peace, found herself at the center of something much bigger than she'd ever imagined. The morning after receiving the threatening text, Maya woke with a new sense of clarity. Fear still lived in her chest, tight and persistent, but something else had taken root beside it. A quiet defiance. She'd spent her whole life watching people back down from Clayton Reese, watching injustice slide by unchallenged because it was safer that way. But Andre's words kept echoing in her mind. Civil rights violations, federal offenses, evidence. Maybe this time could be different. She started documenting everything. Every interaction with the sheriff or his deputies. Every threatening glance. Every overheard conversation. She wrote down dates and times, names of witnesses, details she might have dismissed before as unimportant. Her phone became a repository of screenshots, photos, and voice memos. If Andre was going to fight this fight, she was going to make sure he had ammunition. Meanwhile, Andre had spent the previous evening tracking down Patricia Holbrook. The gray Victorian on Elm Street stood proud despite its age, roses blooming in neat rows along the front path. When he knocked, the woman who answered was in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in practical bun and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by much anymore. You're the one asking questions about the sheriff, she said without preamble. Not a question, a statement. Andre Calloway. And yes, ma'am, I am. Navy. Seal. How'd you know? You walk like my son did. He was Marines. She stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in. We shouldn't talk on the porch. Patricia's living room was lined with filing cabinets and cardboard boxes stuffed with papers. A journalist's archive, carefully maintained even after her newspaper had folded 5 years earlier. The Pine Hollow Gazette died the same month I published an investigative series on Sheriff Reese's department, Patricia said, settling into an armchair. Advertisers pulled out overnight. Our biggest sponsors suddenly couldn't afford to support local journalism. Funny how that works. What did you find? She gestured to the boxes. 8 years of pattern and practice. Harassment, complaints that disappeared from official records, but I'd already copied. Financial statements showing the sheriff's personal wealth growing far beyond his salary. Property seizures under dubious legal circumstances. Traffic stop data showing clear racial profiling. Election irregularities in precincts where his cousin was the registrar. Andre felt his pulse quicken. This was more than he'd hoped for. Why didn't you take this to federal authorities? I tried. Patricia's smile was bitter. Sent everything to the FBI field office in Jackson. Never heard back. Sent it to the state attorney general. File went missing. I learned the hard way that Clayton Reese has friends in places that matter. Men he went to college with. Men whose campaigns he supported. Men who owe him favors. But you kept the evidence. I'm a journalist. We keep everything. She stood and pulled a box from the shelf. This is what you need. Bank records showing deposits that don't match any legitimate income. Sworn affidavits from people who left town rather than fight him. Internal department emails I obtained through a sympathetic deputy who later resigned. Andre opened the box, scanning documents with growing understanding. This wasn't just abuse of power. This was organized corruption. Land deals where property was seized under false pretenses and then sold to Reese's business partners at below-market prices. Drug evidence that went missing from the evidence locker with no investigation into the disappearance. Payoffs from local businesses in exchange for favorable treatment or protection from harassment. There's more, Patricia said quietly. 3 years ago, a young man named Deshaun Williams died in custody. Official report said suicide. His family said he had marks on him that didn't match hanging. They wanted an independent autopsy, but the body was cremated before they could get a court order. The room went cold. Andre looked up from the documents. You're saying Reese might be responsible for a death? I'm saying there are questions that were never answered. The deputy on duty that night was transferred to another county within a week. The family was offered a settlement on the condition they sign an NDA. They took it because they had 3 other kids to feed and a mortgage they couldn't pay. Andre stood, pacing the small room. This had just escalated beyond anything he'd anticipated. If there was even a possibility of a wrongful death, they needed federal involvement immediately. This wasn't something that could be handled quietly or slowly. Can I make copies of these documents? Take the originals. I have duplicates in 3 different locations. Patricia handed him a flash drive. Digital copies are on here too, organized by category and date. If something happens to me, this information needs to get out. Nothing's going to happen to you. She met his eyes with the steady gaze of someone who'd already made peace with risk. You don't know that, but I appreciate the sentiment. Now go. Do what I couldn't. Make him answer for what he's done. Andre left with the box, his mind already working through next steps. He needed to contact his military legal channels, people he trusted who understood how to navigate federal jurisdiction and civil rights law. He needed to get this information to investigators who couldn't be bought or intimidated. But first, he needed to warn Maya that things were about to get more dangerous. He found her at the community college, sitting in her car in the parking lot between classes. When he knocked on the window, she jumped, then relaxed when she recognized him. Sorry, he said as she rolled down the window. Didn't mean to startle you. I'm a little on edge. She gestured to the passenger seat. Get in. Andre slid in, the box of documents on his lap. I met with Patricia Holbrook. Maya, this is bigger than we thought. The sheriff isn't just abusing his power. He's running a criminal enterprise. Land fraud, evidence tampering, financial crimes, and possibly a wrongful death. Maya's eyes widened. Someone died? A man named Deshaun Williams. 3 years ago. In custody. The official story doesn't add up, and the investigation was shut down before it really started. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, I remember that. My mom was still alive. The Williams family went to our church. They moved away right after, said they couldn't stay in a place that had killed their son, and called it suicide. I was 23. I didn't understand then why they just left instead of fighting. They were scared, and they were probably right to be. Andre turned to face her fully. Listen, I'm going to contact federal investigators. Real ones, not local FBI who might have connections to Reese. But once I do that, things are going to move fast. There's going to be scrutiny, and Reese is going to realize someone's building a case against him. It could get dangerous. It's already dangerous, Maya said. My car, those texts, the way people look at me now like I'm radioactive. What's the difference? The difference is intent. Right now, Reese is trying to intimidate you into silence. Once he knows there's a federal investigation, he might escalate to eliminating the threat entirely. Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Are you trying to scare me off? I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're getting into. You still have the option to walk away. I can do this without you. Your testimony would be helpful, but Patricia's evidence might be enough. And what happens to the next person he slaps? The next family he destroys? The next young man who dies in his custody? Maya shook her head. No, I'm not walking away. My brother Jamal is coming home this weekend. I need to tell him what's happening, prepare him. But I'm not backing down. Andre studied her face, seeing the same determination he'd seen in fellow SEALs before difficult missions. Okay, but we do this smart. You don't confront Reese directly. You don't post about this on social media. You keep documenting, but quietly. Can you do that? I can do that. Good. Because we're about to go to war with the most powerful man in this county. And the only way we win is if we're smarter and more patient than he is. That evening, Andre made the calls that would change everything. He contacted a former JAG officer he'd worked with, a woman named Commander Sarah Washington, who now worked in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. He sent her encrypted files containing Patricia's evidence and his own documentation of the diner incident. Her response came within an hour. This is substantial. I'm forwarding to the FBI's Civil Rights Unit and the DOJ Criminal Division. Expect contact within 48 hours. Callaway, if this is as big as it looks, you may have just uncovered one of the most egregious cases of systemic corruption we've seen in rural law enforcement this decade. The weight of those words settled over Andre. This was real now. Official. There was no going back. While Andre built his federal case, Maya drove home to prepare for Jamal's visit. Her little brother called just as she was pulling into her apartment complex. Hey, Maya, I'm leaving campus in about an hour. Should be there by dinner time. She closed her eyes, gathering courage. Jamal, listen. We need to talk when you get here. About something that happened. What happened? Are you okay? I'm Phoenix. There's something you need to know. Something with the sheriff. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, what did he do? We'll talk when you get here. Just drive safe, okay? Don't speed. Maya, please, Jamal. When you get here, I need to say this in person. After they hung up, Maya sat in her car, gathering herself. She'd been protecting Jamal his whole life, ever since their dad left when Jamal was 6 and she was 11. She'd helped raise him, made sure he did his homework, worked extra shifts to pay for his school supplies and later his college application fees. The idea of him being in danger because of her made her want to pack him up and send him back to school immediately. But he deserved the truth. And if Andre was right, if this was really going to escalate, Jamal needed to know what he might be coming home to. Inside her apartment, Maya's phone rang. Unknown number again. She almost didn't answer, but something made her hit the green button. Hello. Heavy breathing. Then a male voice she didn't recognize. You don't know when to quit, do you? Your brother, Jamal Brooks, lives in Randolph Hall, room 314. Studies engineering. Gets coffee every morning at the campus cafe. Wouldn't want anything to happen to him. The line went dead. Maya's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. They knew about Jamal. They knew where he lived, what he studied, his routines. The threat was crystal clear. She immediately called Andre. When he answered, the words tumbled out. They threatened Jamal. They know where he lives. They know his schedule. Andre, if something happens to him because of this... Breathe, Maya. Breathe. Is he at school right now? He's driving home. He'll be here in 3 hours. Good. When he gets there, you both stay inside. I'm going to make some calls. We can arrange protection if necessary. Protection? Like witness protection. Not that formal. But I have friends, former military guys who do private security. People I trust. If Reese's people are threatening your brother, we can make sure he's not an easy target. After Andre hung up to make his calls, Maya sat on her couch, hugging a pillow to her chest. This was the cost of standing up. This was what happened when you challenge power. They didn't just come after you. They came after everyone you loved. Her phone buzzed with a text from Andre. called in a favor. Friend of mine, former Marine named James Carter, lives 2 hours away. He's going to keep an eye on your building tonight. You won't see him, but he'll be there. Another text. Federal investigators are moving faster than expected. They want to interview you tomorrow. Are you ready? Maya typed back, ready as I'll ever be. But she wasn't sure if that was true. Across town, in his office at the sheriff's department, Clayton Reese was having a very different conversation. He'd just been informed by one of his deputies that the stranger asking questions was former military with connections to federal law enforcement. The vandalism on Maya's car hadn't shut her up, and now there were whispers that someone had been visiting Patricia Holbrook's house. Reese had survived this long by being proactive, not reactive. If there was a threat, you eliminated it before it became a problem. He picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't used in years. "It's me," he said when the line connected. "We got a situation. I need some people who aren't connected to the department. People who can send a message without it tracing back." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "What kind of message?" "The kind that makes people remember why it's dangerous to ask questions in my county." The federal investigators arrived in Pine Hollow like ghosts, driving unmarked sedans and checking into the motel on the highway using ordinary names. Special Agent Rebecca Foster and Special Agent Marcus Hill had worked civil rights cases for 15 years combined. They knew how to move quietly in small towns where strangers were noticed and talk spread fast. Andre met them in a diner parking lot 30 miles outside Pine Hollow, neutral territory where they wouldn't be observed by Reese's network. "Commander Washington sent us your file," Agent Foster said, a sharp-eyed black woman in her 40s. "I'll be honest, Calloway, what you've documented here could bring down an entire department. But it's also the kind of case that gets messy. Local law enforcement fighting federal oversight, community divided, media circus. You prepared for that?" "I'm prepared to do what's right." Agent Hill, a stocky white man with graying temples, opened a briefcase. "We'll need to interview the primary witness, Maya Brooks. We'll need access to Patricia Holbrook's archives. And we'll need to do this carefully. If Sheriff Reese catches wind that FBI is actively investigating, he could start destroying evidence. He already knows someone's digging. I'm sure of it. He's not stupid." "No," Foster agreed. "Men like Reese are rarely stupid. Arrogant, yes. Overconfident in their untouchability, absolutely. But not stupid. That's what makes them dangerous when cornered." They spent 2 hours going through the evidence, with Andre providing context and background. By the end, both agents looked grim. "This Deshaun Williams' death," Hill said. "We'll need to pull the original autopsy report if it still exists. Interview the family if they're willing. If there's even a possibility this was a wrongful death covered up by law enforcement, that changes everything." "How long before you can move on this?" Andre asked. Foster glanced at her partner. "We'll start interviews tomorrow. If the evidence is as solid as it appears, we could have enough for an arrest warrant within a week. But Calloway, you need to understand something. Once we start interviewing people, word will spread. Reese will know, and he'll act. What kind of action are we talking about? Could be anything. Intimidation, evidence destruction, witness tampering. In worst-case scenarios, we've seen suspects flee or attempt to harm key witnesses. That's why we're going to need cooperation from local law enforcement, which given the circumstances is complicated." "There's a deputy," Andre said. "Connor Briggs. He's young, relatively new to the department. I've seen the way he looks at Reese when the sheriff's not watching. I think he might be sympathetic. Could be an ally or could be a plant," Hill warned. "We'll feel him out carefully." That evening, Maya sat Jamal down in their small living room. Her brother was 22, tall and lean like their father had been, with the same intense focus he brought to his engineering studies. He noticed immediately that something was wrong. "You've been jumpy since I got here," he said. "And there's a guy sitting in a car across the street who's been there for 2 hours. So what's going on?" Maya told him everything. The slap, the vandalism, the threats, Andre's investigation, the federal agents. She watched her brother's expression shift from shock to anger to something harder and more determined. He hit you, Jamal said, his voice dangerously quiet. That sheriff put his hands on you, and everyone just watched. Jamal, don't go trying to be a hero. That's exactly what they want, an excuse to arrest you or worse. So what? I'm supposed to just sit here while they threaten my sister? No, you're supposed to trust that we're doing this the right way, with evidence and federal investigators and a law. She grabbed his hands. I need you thinking, not reacting. You're the smart one, remember? The engineer. Help me figure out how to stay safe while we see this through. Jamal took a shaky breath. Who's the guy in the car? Friend of Andre's. Former Marine. He's making sure nobody bothers us tonight. And tomorrow I talk to the FBI. And then we wait to see if justice actually works in Pine Hollow. The next morning, Maya met Agents Foster and Hill at a location Andre had arranged, a lawyer's office in the next county over. The lawyer, a stern woman named Gloria Matthews, specialized in civil rights cases and had agreed to represent Maya pro bono after hearing her story. Agent Foster recorded the interview while Hill took notes. Maya walked them through everything, from the minor conflicts with Reese over the months leading up to the slap, to the moment itself, to the aftermath and threats. She showed them the texts, the photos of her vandalized car, the documentation she'd been keeping. You've been thorough, Foster said with approval. That helps tremendously. Ms. Brooks, I want to be straight with you. This case is going to get attention. National, probably. A black woman assaulted by a white sheriff in a small southern town. Corruption. Federal investigation. The media will want to talk to you. People will form opinions without knowing the facts. Some will support you. Others will attack you. Are you prepared for that? Maya thought about her mother, about the strength it took to raise 2 kids alone while working double shifts at the textile plant. She thought about Jamal and his future, about all the young people in Pine Hollow who deserve to grow up without fear of their own law enforcement. I'm prepared, she said. What do you need me to do? For now, stay safe. Document any further incidents. Don't engage with Reese or his deputies unless absolutely necessary. We'll be conducting more interviews over the next few days. Once we have enough, we'll move to arrest. After the agents left, Gloria Matthews sat down with Maya. They're good at what they do. If anyone can build an airtight case, it's Foster and Hill. But you should know, the sheriff's office might try to discredit you. They might dig into your past, try to find anything they can use to paint you as unreliable or with an agenda. I don't have anything to hide. Everyone has something. A traffic ticket, an argument with a neighbor, an angry social media post from 5 years ago. They'll try to make you the story instead of Reese's actions. Stay calm, stay consistent, and trust the process. Meanwhile, in Pine Hollow, the tension was building like storm clouds. Deputy Connor Briggs had been approached carefully by the federal agents, and after initial suspicion, he'd agreed to cooperate. He provided internal department records showing a pattern of complaints against Reese that had been buried, use of force incidents that were never properly investigated, and evidence logs with suspicious gaps. Why are you doing this? Agent Hill had asked him during their private conversation. Connor had stared at his hands. Because I became a cop to help people. And every day I watch Sheriff Reese hurt people and call it justice. I have kids. I don't want them growing up thinking this is what law enforcement looks like. But Connor's cooperation came with risk. Other deputies had noticed him talking to the strangers in suits. Rumors started spreading through the department that someone was cooperating with an outside investigation. Sheriff Reese called a meeting of his senior staff, closing the doors and speaking in a low, dangerous tone everyone recognized as more threatening than shouting. Someone in this department is talking to federal agents, he said, his eyes moving from face to face. Someone is betraying the brotherhood, the trust we've built. When I find out who it is, there will be consequences. Severe consequences. Do I make myself clear? The deputies nodded, but Connor felt sweat trickling down his back. He kept his expression neutral, but inside his heart was racing. That same evening, something happened that would shift the entire case in a higher gear. A video appeared on social media. The footage from Andre's phone, the moment Reese slapped Maya in the diner. It had been anonymously uploaded with a simple caption, "This is justice in Pine Hollow, Georgia." Within hours, it had thousands of views. By morning, it had been picked up by state news outlets. By afternoon, national cable networks were running segments on small-town corruption and police brutality. Maya's phone exploded with notifications. Friend requests, interview requests, messages of support, messages of hate. Someone had identified her, and suddenly her name was trending on social media. "I didn't release the video," Andre told her when she called him, panicked. "I wouldn't do that without your consent." Then who did? I don't know. But whoever was just accelerated everything. Reese can't bury this now. The whole country is watching. In his office, Clayton Reese watched the video play on his computer screen for the 10th time, his face growing redder with each viewing. His phone had been ringing constantly. The mayor, the county commissioners, the state party leadership, everyone wanted to know what was happening, what he was going to do, how he was going to contain this. He'd underestimated the situation. He'd thought intimidation would work the way it always had. He'd thought burying the complaint and threatening the witnesses would be enough. He'd been wrong. Now he had federal agents in his county, a viral video making him look like a monster and mounting pressure from every direction. He needed to regain control, and he needed to do it fast. Reese called his lawyer, a slick attorney named Kenneth Whitmore, who specialized in defending law enforcement in misconduct cases. "We're going to get ahead of this," Whitmore said. "Hold a press conference. Express regret for the incident. Say you were having a difficult day and lost your temper, but you've apologized to Ms. Brooks privately, and she's accepted. She hasn't accepted anything. She's cooperating with the feds." Whitmore paused. "Then we change strategy. We question her credibility. Suggest she has an agenda. Paint this as a personal vendetta against local law enforcement. We pull together character witnesses, people who will testify to your years of service, your dedication to the community. And the other evidence? The financial stuff, the complaints. We'll handle it piece by piece. But right now, public opinion is what matters. We need to shift the narrative before this becomes unrecoverable." That night, Sheriff Reese held a press conference on the steps of the Pine Hollow courthouse. He wore his dress uniform, American flag behind him, expression somber and controlled. "I want to address the video that's been circulating," he began. "What you saw was a moment I'm not proud of. A moment where I let my frustration get the better of me. I've served this community for 20 years, first as a deputy alongside my father, then as your sheriff. In all that time, I've tried to uphold the law fairly and justly. But I'm human, and humans make mistakes." He paused, as if gathering emotion. "I've reached out to Ms. Brooks to apologize personally. This incident doesn't reflect who I am or what I stand for. I'm committed to regaining the community's trust and continuing to serve Pine Hollow with honor and integrity." The reporters shouted questions, but Reese waved them off and retreated inside. The performance had been pitch perfect, hitting all the right notes of contrition without actually admitting wrongdoing. Watching from her apartment, Maya felt sick. "He's lying. I never received any apology. He never tried to reach out." Andre, sitting beside her, nodded grimly. "He's trying to control the narrative. Make himself look reasonable, and you look unreasonable if you don't accept his fake apology. So what do I do? Nothing. You don't respond to his press conference. You don't engage with the media circus. You let the federal investigation do its work. The truth will come out, but it has to come out through official channels, not Twitter arguments." But staying silent felt impossible when her phone kept buzzing with messages calling her everything from hero to a liar to worse things she didn't want to read. The town was dividing, exactly as Agent Foster had predicted. Some people were finally speaking up about their own experiences with Reese. Others were defending him fiercely, seeing the investigation as an attack on their way of life. At the high school, teachers debated in the break room. At the grocery store, customers took sides. At the diner where Maya worked, Maggie finally called her. "I'm sorry, Honey, the older woman said, her voice heavy with regret. I'm getting pressure. People saying they won't eat here if I keep you on. I don't believe a word of it, what they're saying about you. But I have a business to run. You're firing me. I'm giving you paid leave until this settles. It's the best I can do. Maya hung up feeling hollowed out. The job hadn't been much, but it had been hers. It had paid her bills and Jamal's tuition. Now even that was gone. But when she told Jamal, he surprised her. Good. You don't need to be serving people who think what Reese did was okay. And don't worry about money. I could take a semester off, get a job. Absolutely not. You're not stopping your education because of this. Then we'll figure it out together. He hugged her tight. We've gotten through worse, remember? When Mom died, and we had nothing but each other. We survived that. We'll survive this. In his motel room, Andre received a call from Commander Washington. The video accelerated our timeline. DOJ is authorizing arrest warrants. FBI will execute them within 48 hours. But Calloway, there's chatter. Our sources indicate Reese might be planning something. He's feeling cornered, and cornered animals are dangerous. You need to make sure your witnesses are protected. How protected are we talking? Safe house level. At least until after the arrest. Can you arrange that? Andre looked out his window at the quiet street. Somewhere out there, Clayton Reese was making his own plans. And Andre had a sinking feeling that the next 48 hours would determine whether justice prevailed or whether power crushed another small-town truth-teller. I can arrange it, he said. But Sarah, if Reese runs or tries something desperate, we'll be ready. Federal marshals are being positioned now. This ends in 2 days, one way or another. After hanging up, Andre texted Maya, pack a bag. You and Jamal. Enough for 3 days. I'm moving you somewhere safe until the arrest happens. Her response came quickly. Is it that bad? It's that close to being over. But the closer we get, the more desperate he becomes. Please trust me. 20 minutes later, Andre pulled up to Maya's apartment. She and Jamal got in with small duffel bags, and they drove through the night to a cabin 2 counties away, owned by one of Andre's former teammates. As they drove through the darkness, Maya watched Pine Hollow disappear in the rearview mirror. Somewhere back there, Sheriff Clayton Reese was realizing that his kingdom was crumbling, that federal agents were circling, that the power he'd wielded for so long was about to be stripped away. And as Andre had warned, cornered animals were dangerous. The storm was coming. The only question was who would still be standing when it passed. The safe house sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by pine trees so dense they blocked out most of the afternoon sun. Maya stood on the porch, coffee cup warming her hands, watching Jamal pace the length of the small living room through the window. Her brother hadn't stopped moving since they'd arrived 12 hours ago, his nervous energy filling every corner of the cabin. Andre's former teammate, a quiet man named Marcus Webb who'd lost his left leg below the knee in Afghanistan, had stocked the cabin with supplies and assured them the property had security cameras on every approach. Then he disappeared to keep watch from his secondary location, leaving them in isolation while the final pieces of the federal case fell into place. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Agent Foster. Town hall meeting tonight at 7 p.m. Sheriff called it. We'll have plainclothes observers present. Do not attend. She showed the message to Andre, who'd just emerged from the cabin with his own coffee. He's trying to control the narrative one last time, Andre said, getting the community together, probably planning to paint himself as the victim of federal overreach. Will people believe him? Some will. That's how power works in places like Pine Hollow. People invested in the old system will fight to protect it, even when it's corrupt. But others are ready for change. The question is which group is bigger. At 7 o'clock that evening, Pine Hollow's town hall was packed beyond capacity. People stood along the walls, spilled into the hallways, gathered on the steps outside. Sheriff Reese stood at the podium, looking every bit the wrong public servant in his pressed uniform. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone used to being heard. I know these have been difficult days for our community. Outside agitators have come in, stirred up trouble, made accusations. They've taken one moment, one mistake I've already acknowledged and apologized for, and turned it into a circus. Murmurs of agreement rippled through certain sections of the crowd. But I want you to know something. I've served Pine Hollow my entire adult life. My father served before me. We've kept this town safe, kept order, protected our values. And I'm not going to let outsiders with political agendas destroy what we've built. In the back of the room, Deputy Connor Briggs felt his stomach turn. He recognized the speech for what it was, a rallying cry for the old guard, a circling of wagons against accountability. Around him, he saw nodding heads, people ready to believe that the problem was federal interference, not local corruption. But then something unexpected happened. An elderly black woman named Dorothy Taylor stood up. She was in her 70s, a retired teacher who'd lived in Pine Hollow since birth. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "Sheriff, I have a question. 3 years ago, my nephew Deshaun Williams died in your custody. Your department said it was suicide. His mama, my sister, said his body had bruises that didn't match your story. She wanted answers, but you offered money to make her go away instead. Was that keeping us safe? Was that protecting our values?" The room went silent. Reese's composure flickered for just a moment. "Mrs. Taylor, that case was thoroughly investigated. By your department. Investigating yourself." Dorothy remained standing. "I stayed quiet then because my sister needed that money to feed her other children. But I see now that staying quiet didn't protect anyone. It just let you keep doing what you do." Before Reese could respond, a white farmer named Tom Harrison stood up. "I got a question too, Sheriff. 2 years ago, you seized my cousin's property for back taxes. Said he owed $12,000. He paid it, had receipts and everything, but the property still got seized. It was sold at auction 3 months later to one of your business partners for half what it was worth. How's that justice?" Another hand went up, then another. The meeting Reese had called to reassert his authority was turning into a public accounting of grievances. Years of buried complaints, swallowed anger, and forced silence were bubbling to the surface. A young Hispanic woman spoke about traffic stops that always seemed to happen when she drove through certain neighborhoods. A black mechanic described being arrested for a crime he didn't commit, charges that were dropped quietly after he lost his shop during the time he couldn't work. A white mother talked about how her domestic violence reports were ignored until she stopped calling. Reese tried to regain control, his voice rising. "These accusations are unsubstantiated. If people had legitimate complaints, they should have filed them through proper channels." "We did," someone shouted from the crowd. "They disappeared." The room erupted in overlapping voices, some defending Reese, others adding their own stories. The careful order he'd maintained for so long was cracking, and everyone could feel it. In a corner of the room, Agent Foster quietly recorded everything on her phone. This wasn't admissible evidence, but it was powerful testimony to the systematic nature of the abuse. The FBI wouldn't need all of it, but it confirmed what their investigation had already shown. This wasn't about one slap or one bad day. This was about a pattern that had gone unchallenged for too long. Outside the town hall, Deputy Connor felt his phone vibrate. A text from an unknown number. "We know it was you. Watch your back." His blood ran cold. The other deputies had figured out he was the one cooperating with the feds. He glanced around the parking lot, suddenly aware of how isolated he was, how easy it would be for someone to arrange an accident or claim he'd been threatening. Connor made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called Agent Hill directly. "They've made me," he said quietly. "The other deputies know I've been talking to you. Where are you right now?" "Town hall parking lot." "Get in your car, drive to the address I'm about to text you. Don't go home. Don't stop anywhere. We'll get you into protective custody tonight." Connor's hands shook as he started his car. He'd known this moment might come, but knowing didn't make it easier. He was about to become a pariah in the department he'd joined, wanting to make a difference. But at least he'd be alive and on the right side of history. Back at the safe house, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the town hall meeting she wasn't allowed to attend. She pulled up social media on her phone, scrolling through the real-time updates from people posting from inside. "They're speaking up," she said, showing Jamal a post from Dorothy Taylor's granddaughter. "People are finally telling their stories." Jamal read over her shoulder. "Doesn't mean Reese is done fighting." "No," Andre agreed from across the room, where he was monitoring his own communications. "It means he's getting desperate. I just got word that Deputy Briggs had to be extracted. The other deputies threatened him." Maya looked up sharply. "Is he okay?" "He's with federal protection now. But it tells us something important. Reese's people are fracturing. Some are staying loyal. Some are trying to save themselves. That's when things get most dangerous, when people start making panic decisions." That fear proved prescient. At 11 o'clock that night, Andre received an urgent call from Agent Foster. "We're moving the arrest up to tomorrow morning. Reese just left town. We tracked him driving toward the state line. Looks like he might be planning to run. What do you need from us? Stay where you are. Keep your witnesses secure. We got federal marshals positioning now. If Reese crosses state lines as a fugitive, this becomes an even bigger federal case. Either way, tomorrow it ends." Andre hung up and turned to Maya and Jamal. "Reese is running. Federal marshals are tracking him. The arrest happens tomorrow morning." Maya felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. What if he gets away? He won't. You can't outrun the federal government, not in the digital age. Every license plate reader, every traffic camera, every toll booth. They'll find him. But Sheriff Clayton Reese wasn't running. Not exactly. He drove through the night to a remote property he owned in the next county, a hunting cabin where he kept records he'd never wanted found in an official search. Documents showing the full extent of his financial crimes, communications with criminal associates, evidence that would confirm everything Patricia Holbrook had suspected and more. He sat in the dark cabin, a bottle of bourbon on the table, and contemplated his options. Run and spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. Fight and likely spend decades in federal prison. Or end this on his own terms. His phone rang. Kenneth Whitmore, his lawyer. "Clayton, where are you? The FBI is looking for you. If you run, it makes everything worse." "It can't get worse, Ken. You've seen the evidence they have. The town turning on me. It's over. It's only over if you give up. Come back. We'll fight this in court. Reasonable doubt, procedural errors. We can work with this." Reese laughed bitterly. "I've seen federal cases before. Once they decide to take you down, you're done. The only question is how long it takes. Then don't make it easy for them. Don't make yourself look guilty by running." There was a long pause. Then Reese said quietly, "I'll think about it," and hung up. He sat in the darkness for another hour, the weight of 8 years of unchecked power pressing down on him. All the shortcuts he'd taken, the people he'd hurt, the corners he'd cut, they'd all felt justified at the time. Necessary. The cost of maintaining order in a complicated world. But now, facing the consequences, he could see how each small corruption had led to larger ones, how the first time he'd looked away from wrongdoing had made it easier to participate in it, how power had slowly poisoned everything it touched. His phone rang again. This time, it was Deputy Harrison, one of his most loyal officers. "Sheriff, where are you?" "There's federal marshals setting up positions all over town. They're getting ready for something big. Tell them I'll be at my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Tell them I'm not running. But Jerry, you need to listen to me. When they come for me, don't get in their way. Don't throw your career away defending me. This is my mess, not yours." After he hung up, Reese sat in the silence of the cabin. Tomorrow morning, he would drive back to Pine Hollow and face what was coming. Not because he'd found sudden nobility, but because running would only make it worse for everyone, including himself. Sometimes surrender wasn't weakness. Sometimes it was the only smart move left. Dawn broke over Pine Hollow with unusual clarity, the sky a brilliant wash of orange and pink. Maya woke in the safe house to the smell of coffee and the low murmur of Andre's voice on the phone in the next room. She found Jamal already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. "Looking at apartments near campus," he said when she joined him. "Thinking maybe I should stay there year-round, not come home for breaks. At least until things settle." Maya poured herself coffee. "Things will settle. After today, Reese will be in custody. The threat will be over. The threat from him, maybe, but you heard what Andre said. There's a whole network of people who benefited from his corruption. They're not just going to disappear because he gets arrested." She sat down beside her brother. "You think we should leave Pine Hollow permanently?" Jamal was quiet for a moment. "I think you should do whatever makes you feel safe. But Maya, you've spent your whole life here. Mom's buried here. Our memories are here. We shouldn't have to be the ones who leave because other people did wrong things." Andre appeared in the doorway. "The arrest is happening in 30 minutes. Federal marshals are in position." Reese showed up at his office 20 minutes ago. Walked right in like it was a normal day. "He came back?" Maya asked, surprised. Sometimes the smartest move is to control the terms of your surrender. If he'd run and they'd caught him in a manhunt, it would have been worse. This way, he gets to walk out with some dignity, face the cameras on his own terms instead of being dragged out of a motel room in handcuffs. They gathered around Andre's laptop to watch the live stream from a local news crew that had camped outside the sheriff's department. Word had spread fast that something was happening. A small crowd had gathered, some holding signs supporting Reese, others calling for justice. At exactly 8:15, federal marshals and FBI agents entered the building. The wait was agonizing. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then the doors opened. Sheriff Clayton Reese walked out flanked by federal agents, his hands cuffed in front of him. He wore his uniform, but no gun belt. His face was composed, almost serene. He looked directly at the cameras as they escorted him to a waiting vehicle. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Shame on you." Another voice called, "We love you, Sheriff." The town's division was on full display. As the vehicle pulled away, Agent Foster appeared on the steps to give a brief statement. "This morning, federal authorities arrested former Sheriff Clayton Reese on multiple charges, including civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, fraud, and conspiracy. Additional arrests may follow as the investigation continues. We want to thank the brave witnesses who came forward and the dedicated law enforcement professionals who assisted this investigation." Maya felt tears streaming down her face without realizing she'd been crying. Jamal put his arm around her shoulders. "It's really over," she whispered. "The arrest is over," Andre corrected gently. "The trial will take time. He'll have lawyers. He'll fight the charges. But yes, the immediate threat is over. You're safe now." Within hours, the story was everywhere. National news networks ran segments on the arrest. Social media exploded with commentary. Maya's phone was flooded with interview requests from journalists, podcast hosts, documentary filmmakers. Everyone wanted to tell her story. Gloria Matthews, her lawyer, called with advice. "You're going to have opportunities to speak publicly. Some will be genuine, others will try to exploit you. Let me vet them first. And Maya, whatever you do, don't let them make you a symbol without your consent. You're a person, not a hashtag." The attention was overwhelming. Maya had gone from serving coffee in obscurity to being recognized in grocery stores, having strangers approach her with tears in their eyes, saying she'd given them courage to speak up about their own experiences with corrupt authority. But not all the attention was positive. Online trolls sent her hateful messages. Anonymous accounts claimed she was lying, that she'd orchestrated everything for attention or money. Someone created a fake fundraising page in her name, trying to scam people who wanted to support her. "How do you deal with this?" she asked Andre one evening, back in her own apartment now that it was safe. "The constant noise, the people who hate you without knowing you." "You remember why you did it," Andre said. "Not for fame or attention. Because it was right. Because staying silent would have let him hurt someone else. Everything else is just static." 2 days after the arrest, Maya made a decision. She would do one interview, carefully chosen. She selected a respected journalist known for thoughtful coverage, not sensationalism. The interview would air nationally, and it would be her chance to tell her story in her own words. During the taping, the journalist asked her about the moment in the diner. "What went through your mind when he hit you?" Maya thought carefully before answering. Rage, helplessness, but also this awful realization that he'd done it because he could, because he'd been doing things like this for years and nobody had stopped him. And I thought about all the people who'd stayed silent before me, not because they were cowards, but because speaking up genuinely wasn't safe for them. That's what corruption does. It makes survival require silence. What would you say to other people in situations where authority abuses power? I'd say document everything. Find people you trust. Know that the system can work, but it takes time and courage, and usually help from outside. And I'd say don't let them make you feel alone. For every person who stays silent out of fear, there's usually someone else ready to stand with you if you reach out. The interview aired on a Thursday evening and was viewed by millions. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Maya's social media gained thousands of followers. Organizations focused on police reform and civil rights reached out, wanting her to speak at events, join advisory boards, lend her name to causes. It was too much, too fast. Gloria helped her navigate the offers, accepting some speaking engagements that aligned with Maya's values and politely declining others. Meanwhile, the legal process ground forward. Reese's arraignment revealed the scope of the charges against him. 23 federal counts ranging from civil rights violations to wire fraud to conspiracy. His bail was set at $5 million, which he couldn't make. He would remain in federal custody pending trial. Additional arrests followed. 2 deputies who'd actively participated in intimidation tactics. A county commissioner who'd taken bribes. A business owner who'd paid for protection. The corruption had run deeper than even Andre had suspected. Deputy Connor Briggs, now under federal protection and cooperating fully, provided testimony that filled in gaps in the investigation. The picture that emerged was of a criminal enterprise that had operated under the guise of law enforcement for nearly a decade. Through it all, Jamal stayed close to his sister. He'd returned to school, but came home every weekend, helping her sort through the chaos, being the steady presence she needed. "I'm proud of you," he said one Saturday afternoon as they sat on her apartment balcony. "I know I was angry at first, scared for you. But watching how you've handled this, the grace you've shown even to people attacking you online, Mom will be proud too." Maya smiled, feeling the truth of it. Their mother had always said that doing the right thing wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing it anyway. The nursing program Maya had put on hold during the crisis welcomed her back. Her professors had followed the story and offered support, helping her catch up on missed coursework. She threw herself into studying, finding solace in the concrete science of anatomy and pharmacology after months of living in chaos. One afternoon, she ran into Tom Harrison, the farmer who'd spoken up at the town hall meeting. He was at the hardware store, buying supplies. "Ms. Brooks," he said, tipping his hat, "I wanted to thank you. My cousin got his property back. Federal investigation found the seizure was fraudulent. He's moving back home next month." "I'm glad," Maya said sincerely. "I'm sorry it took so long. Better late than never. And it wouldn't have happened at all if you hadn't been brave enough to stand up first." Stories like that kept coming. A woman who'd been afraid to report her abusive ex because he was friends with deputies felt safe going to the new interim sheriff. A small business owner who'd been paying protection money for years stopped making the payments and wasn't harassed. The Williams family, Deshawn's parents, reached out to Maya to say they were working with the FBI to have their son's case reopened and properly investigated. Pine Hollow was changing. Slowly, painfully but undeniably. The town council appointed an interim sheriff, bringing in someone from outside the county with a clean record and a mandate to reform the department. He immediately instituted new training on civil rights, created a civilian oversight board, and encouraged community members to report any concerns without fear of retaliation. Not everyone was happy about the changes. Some longtime residents felt their town was being transformed by outsiders, that the federal investigation had been overreach, that things were better before all this trouble started. But their voices were quieter now, less certain. Andre stayed in Pine Hollow longer than he'd originally planned. There was something about seeing the investigation through to its conclusion that felt necessary, like finishing a mission properly. But he knew he couldn't stay indefinitely. He had his own life to return to, decisions to make about his future after the military. The night before he planned to leave, he and Maya had dinner at a restaurant in the next town over, away from the constant recognition she faced in Pine Hollow. "What's next for you?" she asked. "Not sure yet. The Navy's offered me some positions if I want to go back to active duty. I've also been talking to some organizations that work on police reform, thinking I might be able to help on a larger scale." "You'd be good at that. What about you? Still planning to be a nurse?" "Definitely. Though people keep asking me to consider law school, public policy, all these other paths. But I like the idea of being someone who helps people directly, one person at a time. There's something pure about that." Andre smiled. "That's exactly right. The big systemic changes matter, but so does the individual care. Both are necessary." They talked for hours, these two people who'd been strangers weeks ago and were now bound by shared experience and mutual respect. There was no romance between them, just a deep recognition of what they'd accomplished together. As Andre walked Maya to her car, she said, "Thank you for not looking away, for caring about a stranger's problem in a town that wasn't yours. Thank you for being brave enough to let me help. A lot of people in your position would have taken the threat seriously and stayed quiet. You chose differently." They hugged goodbye, knowing they'd likely stay in touch but might never see each other in person again. That was okay. Some people enter your life for a season, change everything, and then move on. That didn't make the impact any less real. Driving home, Maya thought about how much had changed in such a short time. The fear that had permeated her daily life was gone. She could walk into the diner without her stomach clenching. She could drive through town without constantly checking her mirrors. The weight she'd been carrying had lifted. Tomorrow, she would go to class, study for her anatomy exam, call Jamal to check on his week, live a normal life, the kind of boring, peaceful existence she'd once taken for granted. But she also knew she'd carry this experience forward. The understanding that ordinary people could challenge extraordinary power, that systems could change when enough people refused to accept them. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else mattered more. In his federal holding cell, Clayton Reese sat with the reality of his choices. His lawyer was building a defense, but both of them knew the evidence was overwhelming. The best they could hope for was a plea deal that might reduce his sentence from decades to years. He thought about the moment in the diner, the slap that had seemed so insignificant at the time, a thoughtless act of anger and dominance. He'd slapped people before, metaphorically and sometimes literally. It had always worked to keep them in line. But this time, someone had been watching, someone who wouldn't be intimidated. And that single moment of unchecked power had unraveled everything he'd built. The irony wasn't lost on him. After all those years, all that careful control, he'd been brought down by his own arrogance in a moment he'd barely thought about. Tomorrow, the real work of justice would continue. Trials would be prepared. Testimony would be gathered. The legal system would grind forward at its deliberate pace. But tonight, in Pine Hollow, people slept a little easier. The fear that had been part of the town's atmosphere for so long had finally begun to lift. And that, perhaps more than any arrest or conviction, was the real victory. 6 months after Sheriff Clayton Reese's arrest, Pine Hollow had settled into a cautious new normal. The media circus had moved on to other stories, leaving the town to deal with the slower, harder work of actual change. Maya walked through the same streets she'd known her whole life, but everything felt different now. People met her eyes instead of looking away. Conversations happened in full voice instead of whispers. The federal trial was set to begin in 3 weeks. Prosecutors had built a case so comprehensive that Reese's lawyers had approached them about a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, witness testimony, internal documents Connor Briggs had provided, and Patricia Holbrook's meticulous archive spanning years. Maya sat in Gloria Matthews' office going over her testimony one more time. She would be called as a witness, and though the moment in the diner was just one piece of a much larger case, it was the incident that had started everything. The defense will try to rattle you, Gloria warned. They'll suggest you had a grudge against the sheriff, that you wanted attention, that the slap wasn't as serious as you made it seem. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and remember that the evidence speaks for itself. I'm ready, Maya said, and she meant it. The fear that had once paralyzed her had transformed into something steadier. Determination. That evening, she met Jamal for dinner at a new restaurant that had opened on Main Street. Her brother looked healthy and focused, his engineering studies going well. He made the dean's list last semester and was already fielding internship offers from major companies. How's it feel, he asked, knowing it's almost over? Strange. I keep waiting for something else to happen, for it to fall apart somehow. But Gloria says the case is solid. Reese is going to prison for a long time. And then what? What happens to you after the trial? Maya had been thinking about that question a lot lately. I graduate in a year. Take my nursing boards. Maybe stay in Pine Hollow, maybe not. For the first time in a long time, I actually have choices. Across town, in a federal detention facility, Clayton Reese sat across from Kenneth Whitmore reviewing the plea offer. 20 years in federal prison in exchange for full cooperation and guilty pleas to 15 counts. It would spare him a trial and potentially reduce his sentence with good behavior, but it would also mean admitting to everything. If we go to trial, we might do better, Whitmore said without much conviction. Create reasonable doubt on some charges, and risk 40 years instead of 20. Reese shook his head. I'm 52 years old, Ken. Even with the plea, I'll be 72 when I get out. If I get out, no, I'm done fighting. Let's take the deal. The lawyer nodded slowly. I'll inform the prosecutors. They'll want your full cooperation on the wider investigation. There are still people out there who benefited from the corruption. They'll want names. They can have them. All of them. Reese looked at his hands, remembering all the things they'd done. I spent 8 years thinking I was protecting this town. Turns out I was just protecting my own power. Let all come out. The plea deal made headlines. Some people in Pine Hollow felt cheated that there wouldn't be a dramatic trial, while others were relieved the town wouldn't have to endure months of testimony and media attention. Maya felt something like closure, though she knew the real healing would take much longer. Deputy Connor Briggs had been hired by the interim sheriff to help implement the new reforms. He worked with the Civilian Oversight Board, training deputies on proper procedures and community engagement. It wasn't easy work. Some officers resented the changes, seeing them as punishment for Reese's crimes. But Connor persisted, believing the department could be what he'd hoped it would be when he first joined. One afternoon, he stopped by Maya's apartment to update her on the Deshaun Williams case. The FBI reopened it officially, he said. They've got forensic experts reviewing the original autopsy report and crime scene photos. The deputy who was on duty that night is cooperating now that Reese can't protect him. It looks like there was a confrontation that went wrong, and then a cover-up. Maya felt her throat tighten. Will the family get answers? They will. Real ones, not the lies they were told before. It won't bring Deshaun back, but maybe it helps to know the truth. After Connor left, Maya sat quietly thinking about all the ways corruption rippled outward. One young man dead, one family destroyed, one truth buried, and all of it allowed to continue because people were afraid to challenge authority. She thought about Andre, who'd returned to active duty with a Navy SEAL team deployed overseas. They emailed occasionally brief updates on their lives. He'd been right about the importance of accountability, about how standing up to corruption mattered not just for the immediate victims, but for everyone who came after. Patricia Holbrook published a series of articles online documenting the full scope of what she'd uncovered over the years. Major news outlets picked up her work, and she was fielding offers from publishers interested in turning her reporting into a book. At 73, she'd finally gotten the recognition her journalism deserved. The town slowly rebuilt trust in law enforcement. The interim sheriff, a man named Robert Sullivan who'd spent 20 years with the state police, held monthly community forums where residents could ask questions and voice concerns. Attendance was high at first, then settled into a steady core of engaged citizens. Maya attended one of these forums and was surprised when Sullivan asked her to speak about her experience. "I don't have much to add that people don't already know," she said, standing somewhat awkwardly at the microphone. "But I guess I'd say this. Accountability doesn't happen by accident. It requires people being willing to speak up, even when it's scary, even when it costs something. And it requires institutions being willing to listen and change. Both have to happen." The applause was genuine and sustained. Afterward, several people thanked her privately for her courage. An older woman, Maya, didn't recognize, hugged her and whispered, "You gave my daughter the strength to leave her abusive husband. She'd been afraid to go to the police. Now she knows they'll help." Stories like that reminded Maya why it had all been worth it. Spring came to Pine Hollow with an explosion of dogwood blossoms and warming temperatures. Maya stood on the stage at the community college in her nursing school graduation gown, diploma in hand, looking out at the small crowd of supporters. Jamal sat in the front row, his proud smile visible even from the stage. Gloria Matthews was there, as was Patricia Holbrook. Even Connor Briggs had come, taking time off duty to attend. It felt like a victory that had nothing to do with Sheriff Reese and everything to do with the future Maya had worked toward for years. She was a registered nurse now, with job offers from the county hospital and a clinic in the next town over. She'd earned this through her own determination, and no one could take it away. At the reception afterward, Jamal pulled her aside. "Mom would have been so proud of you. Not just the nursing degree, though that's huge, but everything you did, the way you handled it all. We did it together," Maya corrected. "You supported me through everything. I couldn't have made it without you. So what's next? You taking the hospital job?" "Actually, I'm considering the clinic. It's smaller, more community-focused. I like the idea of being the nurse who knows her patients, builds relationships. Plus, it's in Pine Hollow. I thought about leaving, but this is home, and I want to be part of making it better." A week later, Clayton Reese stood in federal court for his sentencing hearing. He'd already pleaded guilty, but the judge wanted to hear from victims before imposing the sentence. Dorothy Taylor spoke about her nephew Deshaun and the years his family had spent not knowing the truth. Tom Harrison described losing his cousin's property to fraudulent seizure. A woman named Lisa Parker talked about domestic violence that went unanswered because her abuser played poker with the deputies. Maya was the last to speak. She walked to the podium, looked at Reese sitting at the defense table, and spoke clearly. "What you did to me in that diner was humiliating and wrong. But it was also a small thing compared to what you did to others. I got slapped and threatened. Other people lost their homes, their businesses, their freedom, their lives. I'm fortunate that I had help, that federal investigators listened, that there were people brave enough to stand with me. Not everyone gets that. So when you sentence him, Your Honor, I hope you remember that this isn't just about one moment of violence. It's about years of systematic abuse that hurt this whole community." The judge sentenced Reese to 22 years in federal prison, slightly more than the plea deal recommended due to the severity and scope of his crimes. He would be 74 when released, if he lived that long. As the marshals led him away, Reese looked at Maya one last time. There was no defiance in his expression, just exhaustion and something that might have been regret. Outside the courthouse, Maya stood with Gloria and Jamal as reporters asked for comments. She kept it brief. Justice was served today, not just for me, but for everyone Sheriff Reese hurt over the years. Now the real work begins, rebuilding trust and making sure this never happens again. The Deshaun Williams case concluded a month later. The deputy who'd been on duty that night pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and obstruction of justice. The medical examiner who'd falsified the autopsy report lost his license. It didn't bring Deshawn back, but his family finally had truth and acknowledgement of their loss. Maya started her job at the Pine Hollow Community Clinic, working alongside Dr. Raymond Foster, a family physician who'd practiced in town for 30 years. The work was exactly what she'd hoped for: helping people, building relationships, making a tangible difference in individual lives. One afternoon, a teenager came in with a sprained ankle from basketball. As Maya wrapped the injury, the girl said shyly, "You're the one who stood up to the sheriff, right?" "I am." "That was brave. I want to be brave like that." Maya smiled. "You know what I learned? Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about caring about something more than you fear the consequences." "What do you care about?" The girl thought for a moment. "I care about my little brother. He's being bullied at school, and I've been afraid to tell anyone because the bully's dad is on the school board." "Tell someone. Tell your parents. Tell a teacher you trust. Tell Dr. Foster or me. Don't let fear make you silent about something that matters." After the girl left, Maya sat in the break room thinking about how change spreads, not through grand gestures alone, but through countless small moments where people chose courage over comfort. That teenager telling someone about her brother's bullying was just as important as Maya standing up to Reese. Both were acts of refusing to accept wrong as inevitable. Jamal graduated that spring with honors in engineering. He'd accepted a job with a renewable energy company in Atlanta, but promised to visit often. On his last night in Pine Hollow before the move, he and Maya sat on the porch of their apartment complex, watching fireflies emerge in the dusk. "You ever regret it?" Jamal asked. "Taking on Reese, going through everything you went through?" Maya considered the question seriously. "No, it was hard and scary, and there were moments I wanted to give up. But I can walk through town now without feeling afraid. I can look at myself in the mirror and know I didn't let injustice slide just because it was easier. That matters. Think things will really change? Long term, I think they already have. Not completely, not perfectly. There's still people here who think Reese was unfairly targeted, who resist the reforms. But there's also people who are speaking up when they see something wrong, who trust that complaints will be investigated, who believe accountability is possible. That's real change." 6 months later, Maya received an email from Andre. He was stateside briefly between deployments and wanted to visit Pine Hollow, see how things had developed. They met at a coffee shop that had opened where the old hardware store used to be, part of the gradual renewal happening downtown. "You look good," Andre said. "Happy." "I am. The work at the clinic is exactly what I hoped for. Jamal's doing great in Atlanta, and Pine Hollow is actually becoming the place I always wanted it to be." "What about you personally? Anyone special in your life?" Maya laughed. "I'm dating a teacher from the high school. Nothing serious yet, but it's nice." "What about you?" "Still figuring things out. But I'm glad I was here when you needed help. Glad we made a difference." They talked for hours, catching up on the changes in town, the ongoing reforms, the small victories in community rebuilding. Before Andre left, he said something that stayed with Maya. "You know what the real victory was? Not the arrest or the conviction. It was breaking the silence, showing people that challenging corruption doesn't mean you disappear. You're still here, thriving, and that example matters more than anything." A year after Reese's sentencing, Maya stood in the town square where the Founders Memorial still stood. The town council had commissioned a new memorial, one that honored all the families who'd built Pine Hollow, not just the wealthy white ones. The unveiling ceremony drew a diverse crowd, something that would have been unusual just 2 years earlier. Dorothy Taylor spoke briefly, dedicating the memorial to her nephew Deshawn and all those who'd suffered injustice. "We remember the past, not to stay stuck in it, but to build a better future. That's what monuments should do. Help us remember and help us grow." That evening, Maya walked through the diner where it had all started. New owners had taken over, keeping the name Maggie's, but updating the menu and atmosphere. She slid into a booth, ordered coffee, and looked around at the familiar space transformed. The young waitress who served her didn't recognize Maya, which felt appropriate somehow. The story was moving into history, becoming part of the town's collective memory rather than its immediate present. Life was moving forward. Maya pulled out her phone and wrote a message she'd been composing mentally for weeks. She posted it to her social media, knowing some people would see it and others wouldn't, but feeling it needed to be said. 2 years ago, I was just trying to do my job and get through nursing school. I didn't plan to become a symbol or story. But sometimes ordinary moments require us to make choices that change everything. If you're facing injustice, document it, find allies, and speak truth even when your voice shakes. The system doesn't always work, but it works more often when people refuse to stay silent. And to everyone who supported me through that journey, thank you. We changed Pine Hollow together. Now, let's keep making it better. She put her phone away and sipped her coffee, watching through the window as people walked past on Main Street. Lives being lived, stories unfolding, a town healing and growing and becoming something new. Power wasn't loud. It wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was just the quiet decision to refuse to look away, to stand up when standing up mattered, to believe that justice was possible even when it seemed impossible. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. If someone in authority abused their power right in front of you, would you have the courage to stand up, or would you be one of the people staring at your plate pretending not to see? Drop a like if this story moved you, and subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who refuse to stay silent.